You're listening to the Ratcast, a weekly podcast-style YouTube series. I'm your host, the Superfluous Rat Man. Today's episode, I want to talk about a recent controversy that arose when a opinion piece was published on Forbes by a writer named, I'm going to butcher this, Panos Murdoch-Cutis. He's an economist and a professor, and he basically wrote an op-ed, and it floated the idea of replacing public libraries with Amazon bookstores. His argument was it was better customer service, and it would save us a lot of tax dollars, and this was his solution, was to save tax money, we should replace all public libraries with these Amazon bookstores. The piece was widely mocked, and a lot of people had a lot of problems with it. So much so that Forbes actually took the piece down, which they probably shouldn't have done because it was an opinion piece. It wasn't like it was necessarily like an endorsed by Forbes, by the publication. But still, the whole thing got a lot of people really riled up. Because he floated the idea, which is a very libertarian idea, that we should, get rid of public resources and take the money we save so we can all have more money to buy books for ourselves instead of having to rely on tax dollars to build libraries, to pay librarians, to order books, so we have access to the books that way. Now, I read this piece before it was taken down. I had seen a tweet first. It was from the author about the piece, so I read the piece, and I had a lot of problems with it right away. I wasn't necessarily offended by it like a lot of people were. I've heard these kind of ideas before, that we should basically, everything that's not completely essential, which basically means like the military, should be cut, and we should take all that money we save so we'll have more money to spend, so we can just kind of choose what we want instead of having to have this, any kind of public safety net, public infrastructure, public education, community involvement, yada yada. That's, not the government's place. This is a very, popular Ayn Rand sort of Paul Ryan, Rand Paul, Ron Paul, libertarian ideology. That's grown a lot in popularity over the last couple of years, especially with the rise of Trump. I just kind of want to give my 2 cents and sort of debunk this whole idea, which I'm just going to come at it from sort of a lefty socialist sort of idealistic worldview. And first I want to talk about what the stated purpose of public libraries are, because it's very different than what people think it is, number one, and also it's different from the mission statement of Amazon, obviously. So, if you hear clicking, I have notes brought up, so if there's much click in the background, you know why. So this is from the International Federation of Libraries, the International Federation of Library Associations, okay. And this is from a document they released. It's the purpose of libraries, the purpose of public libraries. And it goes as such. The primary purpose of public libraries is to provide resources and services and a variety of media to meet the needs of individuals and groups for education, information, and personal development, including recreation and leisure. They have an important role, libraries have an important role in the development and maintenance of a democratic society by giving the individual access to a wide and varied range of knowledge, ideas, and opinions. This is just basically like their catch-all, what the purpose of libraries is, and then it has a further breakdown about education, information, how they tackle each one of these stated goals. And like it says, there's a lot more. Any one of those things you could break down and make a whole video on, but I'm just going to kind of read their broad definition and what each part sort of means to me. Things like education and information are sort of obvious. You have books for people to read to learn things. Some of the other stuff about, it just says things like resources for individuals, and for recreation and leisure, that's a little more broad. As you know, at least in the United States, libraries have DVDs, some have video games, a lot of them, well, all of them now have access to public Wi-Fi so people can bring their own devices and use the internet. And they also have computers that are there for the public to use. So for members of the community, especially people who are from a lower socioeconomic background, can have access to the internet, which they might not be able to afford at home, or might not have a good connection to at home for whatever reason. Maybe it's economic, maybe it's they live in a rural area, so they have to come into town to, use a good internet connection, so they can have access to, all of the wonderful things the internet has, along with, this Forbes article, which is probably one of the things they weren't happy to find on the internet. So that's sort of the stated goal of libraries, at least from the this particular forum, the International Federation of Library Associations. And I just want to, give my take on what Amazon's mission statement is, and it goes like this. Make as much money as fucking possible, because we're a business. We're not here with public good. We're here to make money, and we're going to make money as much as we can by any means necessary. I'm sure Jeff Bezos would have a problem with me saying that, but realistically, that's what corporations are meant to do. They're meant to produce as much capital for investors and for shareholders and for the owner of the business as possible. Everything else is secondary. So, in the view of this Forbes contributor, the idea that we would close public libraries and therefore save the money is good, because he doesn't fundamentally believe in the goal of libraries, which would be to educate, inform people, and give people access to resources they don't necessarily have in their life or be able to afford on their own. He would rather businesses and individuals save money that would go to taxes. All right. Well, there's a couple problems with this, and I'm just going to break them down. So we've all heard about, corporate tax evasion and whatnot. Amazon is, right up there with Apple as far as trying to get out of paying its corporate taxes. I have a piece in front of me from USA Today. It says that, so Apple paid no U.S. income tax in 2017, and it made $5.5 billion just in domestic profits. And obviously Amazon, the corporation, was a beneficiary of the new Trump tax policy, which obviously cut taxes on the richest individuals and the largest businesses. That's not really a surprise. It's sort of what Republicans state they're going to do and what they do in their office. They cut taxes, they shift the tax burden from the top to the bottom, and they redistribute wealth in sort of an inverse way, or an not indirect, the opposite way of which what somebody like myself, a socialist, would want the money to go. Instead of taking money from the rich, giving it to the poor, taking money from the poor and giving it to the rich, or just making the rich exempt from paying money that other people who don't have, who don't have as much wealth have to pay. So I did some research, and I went to the American Library Association website, and these are the latest numbers. These are from 2012. The operating revenue for public libraries in the United States is $11.5 billion. So that's all the libraries in the country. This is rough, and this is also from about 5 years ago, but these are the latest numbers that are available. And that's actually down 7.2%. I'm sorry, it's up 7.2% in the last 10 years, but it's actually declined from a peak in 2009, which is when the highest library spending was. Now, just using the example of Amazon and public libraries, Amazon right now is looking to build its second headquarters. Its first headquarters is in Seattle, Washington, and they're looking to build the second headquarters in some unknown place in the United States. They've basically put out a request for bids from, cities, municipalities, and whatnot, looking for a home for their business. They've received over 200 bids from cities and regions that are interested. A lot of this from the same USA Today article, but there's been a lot of writing about the new Amazon headquarters. So far they've been offered over $7 billion in tax incentives from cities like Newark, New Jersey, and Chicago, Illinois. And that's just two examples. There was a recent story from... Okay, I'm sorry, my microphone came unplugged for a second. Okay, so the story is from Cleveland, Ohio, and they released... So the city put together a bid for the new Amazon HQ, and it was released, public document, so public could have access to it. Well, almost all of the document was redacted. Um, I'm looking at it right now, and there's basically no information in this document because so much of it has been redacted. Um, this is basically what Cleveland as the city has to offer and basically what they're willing to give away to Amazon, whether it be, giving them property without making them pay property taxes, making them exempt from paying taxes for a certain amount of time, whatever they can do basically to sweeten the deal for Amazon to make them want to to build a new headquarters in Cleveland. By the way, if anybody from Amazon's watching, don't build in Cleveland. It's a trash city. You should never go there. I mean, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is nice. Everything else is sort of, Cincinnati maybe. I mean, even Columbus, but you're not going to want to go to Cleveland. It's just not an ideal place for any sort of business, family, people who don't want to get stabbed. I would stay away from Cleveland as much as humanly possible. That's not really the point of this video, but I just thought I should mention it. Like I said before, the total cost of libraries is $11.5 billion as of 2012. And just Amazon alone has been getting offers of tax incentives to save at least $5 billion. Right? So you can see that the amount of money that goes to public libraries and the amount of money that cities and municipalities are willing to give away to attract Amazon to their region, it's sort of crazy because, this is one business we're talking about. It is one of the largest businesses in the world, I think second only to Apple. Still, the amount of money that places are willing to forego collecting from a giant business is about half of what all of the libraries in America need to be funded for a year. So, I mean, that's sort of crazy, how much we're willing to give away in order to attract a business, to, quote unquote, create jobs. Whether these are good jobs or whether these are, horribly abusive jobs where, warehouse workers pass out and have ambulances on standby and have to, urinate in bottles and whatnot. None of those things are being considered here. At this point, it's basically, we want the headquarters and we're willing to, number one, forgo a lot of revenue and sort of embarrass ourselves and sort of a race to the bottom for places like, which city's willing to give the most away in an effort to draw Amazon to their city. It really is pathetic. You kind of understand it because the economy is so bad. You want to have these, good, quote unquote, good jobs. But it really is just, it's a bad look for the cities. It's bad for the employees who are going to work there. It's bad for the cities because they're forgoing all this tax revenue. It's basically just good for Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Places are lining up to be exploited, and he just sort of has this pick of the litter of where they want to place this new headquarters. And it can, there's, like I said, there's been over 200 bids so far in the U.S. One from every state. So it's crazy. Will this help workers? Will this help raise incomes in these areas overall? Will it lead to lower unemployment? Will it lead to, better job safety, better job security? Who knows? That isn't being considered, at least as far as I know. If it is, it's been redacted to the point where nobody in the public can see it. I would love to see if people putting these bids together had considered these things, or if it was just, a bottom economic line. Can we make this money? There's no indication of that so far. There's no indication besides the economic concern that's been made public, at least not from any of these cities. There's been public outcry, obviously, but there's been no official noted concern of this sort of thing. The main point I'm trying to get across in this video isn't necessarily just about Amazon versus libraries. This is more about wealth redistribution, about taking money from the people on the bottom, money in the form of resources that are available to them through public libraries, internet access to books, access to the internet, access to computer equipment they couldn't afford themselves, especially people in lower socioeconomic backgrounds, people who are poor, people who are the most vulnerable in society. And we're willing to take the money we spend on that, and we're willing to, you know, take this opportunity away from people, the opportunity to be educated or enlightened or entertained, and we want to replace it with a store, because we want to save ourselves collectively $11.5 billion a year. If it were me, I would say, why don't we make Amazon pay their fucking taxes and take that money and make Apple pay their taxes, and we could actually build more libraries, or we could just keep the ones we have funded, and we keep libraries from closing, libraries in the areas where they really frankly need the most have been closing, and that's not an ideal situation for the country, at least in my opinion. I feel like we should prioritize education and the public good, and giving people who need it the most access to resources, instead of continually racing to the bottom, chopping taxes on the incredibly wealthy and the incredibly large businesses. I really think that it won't give us the outcomes we want if the outcome is a productive, happy society. If the outcome is to have, the most money for the fewest number of people, if the goal is to have the lowest corporate taxes in the world, if the goal is to have the largest wealth gap in the world, these aren't what I would consider to be, worthy goals or goals that are worth working towards. These are actually extremely negative things. It's odd. I mean, the piece that was put out, people bashed it, and Forbes was so embarrassed they deleted it. But even the idea that somebody would feel confident to post this kind of opinion piece that's so blatantly pro big business and anti little guy, it's not even shocking, it's just disheartening. So that's what I want to leave you guys with. There's my opinion on the value of public services like libraries, and the sort of betrayal that I felt when I was reading this article, that somebody would want to take the ass money out from the community, and in order to save himself money, that would go to pay for libraries. All right, thanks for sticking with me to the end. If you have any comments or concerns, go ahead and leave them below. I'll be doing another episode like this on Sunday, or I'll be doing an episode like this every Sunday. So if you want to catch that, go ahead and subscribe, and I guess click the bell. I don't know. Everyone always says click the bell. I think that just sends you an email. So do it or don't. I don't really know if it's positive or not. All right. Thanks for listening.